Today I'm reviewing Gallicum Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. This is a game that depicts the campaign of Caesar in Gaul. It is the remade version of an older game, Bellum Gallicum. The game doesn't come in a box, it comes in a folder like this that contains all that you need to play the game, which is map, counters, rulebook, and a player aid with tables and things. Little disclaimer, today I forgot my tripod at home, so I'm holding my camera in my hand, but I don't have time to film this review later, so it is now or never, or who knows how many days in the future. So I'll hold my camera in my hand for today, and I hope the review doesn't come out too shaky. Anyways, here you have the map, which is printed on paper. It has player rates and other important thingies here on the side. The map looks, I think, nice enough, pretty simple, but also pretty functional, and yet at the same time quite thematic. Let me show you the counters that represent the units involved in the conflict. As you may expect, you will have leaders, and leaders have a number that indicates their rating, and a number of swords that indicates the rank, and then we have combat units that are identified by a letter that has to do with the quality and type of the unit, a number of strength points, and an illustration and a name that tells you the type of unit that is, for example, archers, cavalry, infantry. Okay. A turn starts with the supply phase, and during the supply phase, first you have to check to see if concentration of military units in a region make that region become devastated. That is, for each region in which there are 5 or more combat units of one of the two sides, you roll a die. You take modifiers into account. For example, if you're rolling during a winter turn, that is bad. You have a modifier that increases the chances that the region will be devastated. The Romans can put supply depots on the board, and that increases their chances of not devastating a region. However, if you're not lucky and the die roll it indicates a 5 or a 6 on a d6, after all modifiers have been taken into account, then you place a scorched earth marker on the board. I'll place it there so that the area doesn't become too crowded. And in regions where there is such marker, because it was just placed or because it was placed in previous turns, units that are sitting there will have to take an attrition roll. And there is an attrition table for that. You roll on this table, you roll a number of dice that is indicated by the cross-reference or the number of units in the devastated region, cross-referenced with the type of region that the units are in. You roll that amount of dice, and for each 6 that you roll, one of your units is reduced. And the anti-Roman player can also choose to place scorched earth markers on the board just to make the area a little less hospitable for the Roman invaders. And scorched earth markers are removed during each August turn. After the supply phase, you have reinforcements as indicated by the scenario instructions, replacements that the Roman player may receive during the campaign game. Well, as I'm talking about these scenarios, the game does come with a quite nice package of scenarios that represent different phases of the war in Gaul. The scenarios are really different from one another. They usually do not use all of the map, or in any case they emphasize particular areas or zones of the map. And they play different from one another. They may last an hour or a little more or considerably more. You have a campaign game which is longer but also more complex because it has extra procedures to resolve anti-Roman rebellions, to resolve campaigns in Germania, in Britannia. A lot of stuff. This is definitely a package that allows you to play a lot of different things, to have a lot of different game experiences on this map with these units and with the rules of the game. Back to the game proper. After the supply phase, the Roman player can move his units. Combat units can move only if they are led by a leader, and usually they move only into an adjacent area. However, Roman units can also choose to force march, that is, to move an extra area, but if they do so, they have to take an attrition roll using the line of the attrition table for the region that they are moving through, that they're passing through to reach their destination. Anti-Roman units cannot force march. Then the anti-Roman units receive their reinforcements, and then they can move. It may be that the Romans, by moving, have triggered some battle, that is, some battle that will be resolved later after all movement is completed, and maybe the anti-Roman units want to move from there. But in any case, there's a rule that says that if you're trying to move out of a region that contains enemy units, you have to roll a die. Modifiers need to be taken into account, and depending on the result, you may or may not be able to leave a region. After both players have moved and after both players have resolved the effects of movement, you resolve battles. And actually there are two types of battles. One is a skirmish, and the other one is a full battle, a pitched battle. In this game, armies are defined as groups of 5 combat units or more. If both sides have an army involved in the conflict, involved in the fight in the region, then you have a pitched battle. You may have a siege in case one of the two sides is defending in one of these locations, in an oppida. Or you may have a skirmish in case one of the two sides is not an army. When you're resolving a skirmish, one of the two sides may try to avoid the skirmish, then a die is rolled to see if the group that wants to lead the region is actually able to lead the region. If not, you resolve the skirmish, which is resolved in a pretty traditional fashion. You compute the combat odds that are obtained by dividing the total combat strength of the attacking units by the total combat strength of the defending units. You turn that into proportion, and then you cross-reference that with a die roll, which will be affected by combat modifiers. These modifiers are very important because they're pretty much what makes combat interesting. Well, on top, of course, of putting together vast armies to outnumber your opponent, it is also a matter of using specific types of units and deploying your leaders skillfully and cleverly on the map. And then you cross-reference the die roll with the proportion of strength between the two sides, and the results may be AE, attacker eliminated, AR, attacker reduced, attacker loss, exchange, and so on and so forth. Pretty traditional stuff. A pitched battle is resolved on a similar table, but as you can see, the results are a little more interesting. And actually, there is another interesting fact. The pitch battle is resolved on this display here, and also is played in 2 rounds, or 2 waves, in the case 2 sections. When you start the pitch battle, you place your combat units that you transfer from the map to your line, and you place units in the right, center, and left of your side of the display. You can also place some of your units in reserve. Leaders go there, and we do the same for the Romans. I would do it just like this. There we go. See, so no reserves for the Romans, all in the first line. Now you divide the total combat strength of the attacking units in the first line, not in reserve, by the total attack strength of the defending units in the first line, not in reserve. Again, you find a proportion. You roll on the pitch battle table using different sets of modifiers. This is pretty important to keep in mind before you start one type of confrontation or the other. The result may be an R, rien, nothing. The result may be, as you can see, 3/4, half, 1/4, because the result on the left of the little dash applies to the attacker, the other one to the defender. When it's results such as 1/2 or 3/4, that means that the player reduces the indicated proportion of his units as units, not as strength points. That is, you simply flip them to the reduced side. Also, there may be units that are eliminated because they may have been reduced in the previous phase of the battle. And also there are simply results that will eliminate an entire force, or maybe the unit started the battle, reduced already. In any case, after you apply the reductions, suppose that by applying the reductions, some of my units have been eliminated and some reduced, I place in the A box of each area of the first line units that have been reduced, and in the some sort of like French stuff that starts with A, and in the E box units that have been eliminated. But if this is the first wave of the fight, even units in the eliminated box may be able to rally. So you apply this procedure and you apply the results. Then, before you start the second wave of the battle, the units that are in these boxes try to rally. Then you look at the route table, you roll a d6, and you cross-reference that result, a single die roll for all fours that you're testing at this time. You cross-reference the result with the quality of the unit, which is represented by those letters V, R, E, A, B, L, G, and you saw those letters printed on the counters earlier. Well, you cross-reference that and you have a result for each unit. Result may be rallied, dispersed, or routed. But what that means is then you figure out by reporting, pretty much reporting that result to the rally table, because, for example, a rallied result means that a unit in box E, that means that was eliminated earlier, can actually return to the first line on its reduced side. A unit that was in box A, the reduced box, returns intact. As you can see, other results are possible. So actually, depending on the result of the first round of battle, the quality of the unit, and the roll on the route table, different things are possible. And in fact, it may be possible the reduced units are able to come back into the fight. Then, at that point, reserves may enter the battle. And at that point, you repeat the procedure. That is, you recalculate the odds, you take modifiers into account. Again, you look at this table, roll a die, and at this point, you also take into account the side that obtains a bold result, a result printed in bold, because that indicates the winner of the battle. You also have sieges which are a little tougher, well, because they're less lethal and they take longer to resolve. That is, they may take several turns. However, each turn in which a siege is continuing, you use a marker to indicate the number of turns that the siege has lasted, and after 4 turns the siege is over because the defenders surround, no matter the exact result at that point, the exact result of the last turn of siege. So for my conclusions, do I like this game? Yes, actually I do. I like it quite a bit. I think that this is a good game. I like the balance there is here between an overall pretty simple system, pretty approachable. The rules are overall clear, with a couple of minor things here and there that the designer has already clarified online, though there is help out there with the 1 or 2 ambiguities that you may encounter, but the game is not hard to learn, and once you get started it really flows well. Month after month and year after year, if you're playing the campaign game, new stuff happens, a narrative develops, and there's a balance here between the overall simple rules, the very approachable system, and the story that the game tells you. All the scenarios really feel very thematic, really feel like they capture a specific event. They give you a snapshot of a part of the very complex event that the overall game portrays. And then, of course, if you want to have the big picture, you also have the campaign game. But I found that the game manages to give you a good sense of history, a good amount of historical flavor with a system that doesn't feel cumbersome at all. The two sides play in very different ways. Being the Romans means switching between moments of inebriation when you manage to catch your opponents in the open battlefields and they don't run before the confrontation, and then of course you smash them, because really the anti-Roman forces should not face the Romans just like that in the battlefields too often and without ensuring that they have some other sort of advantage here or there. But then frustration when, yes, the opponent do leave the battlefield a second before the battle starts. There are always ways to avoid the battle, or at least to attempt to avoid the battle. And then there are sieges, which, as I started playing the game, seemed to me to be the weakest part of the game, because the game could become a little stagnant there. It really was about sitting around the Oppida where the anti-Roman player is hiding and waiting turn after turn, launching attacks and seeing the forces of the two sides being reduced gradually. But it just seemed a little less exciting. However, then I found out that actually, if you look at the situation in a broader sense, there are things that are going on, even though it may not look like it, which is you may have areas of the board in which the Romans are just sitting out of the enemy oppidum, but other anti-Roman forces may be reorganizing, maybe forming larger groups. Actually, I found that a very effective strategy for the anti-Roman player, indeed, is to form largish groups of units and then to attack Roman units that are sieging an oppidum, because that forces the Roman army to split. In that case, you may end up forcing the Romans to face two situations with two halves of the armies, two sections of the armies, none of which is all that excellent, is as excellent as it could be. So even when the Romans are just staying there, there is a movement of units around all the activities that the anti-Romans are trying to perform, and at the same time, of course, the Roman player knows that this is happening, so you also have similar things. You also have reactions, that is, the Romans that detach from the main army are trying to prevent the opponents from reforming, from regrouping. So actually I found there is this nice moving around the action, from concentration of the action in certain locations where sieges are taking place, to other areas in which it is more about impeding movement of the opponent, trying to destroy areas and creating devastated areas in which the opponent may have a harder time moving into. These I found a nice interaction between areas of the board where major or larger actions are being resolved and where minor groups of units are maneuvering, preparing something big that may or may not happen, depending of course on how the two sides maneuver. But definitely I found enough wrinkles, enough angles that the action can be approached from, enough nuances to make the game interesting and fun. So, Bellum Gallicum Episode 2. This is a game that I enjoyed. Definitely a game that I don't know if it could work as a complete beginner's game. Maybe not. Maybe there are the games that give you more of an immediate satisfaction if you never played a war game before. But it's not a game that would be too complex for you to pick up as your first war game. But in any case, it is a game that I found rewarding to play. Maybe it doesn't come in the most deluxe box, but there definitely is a good game in here. There is a game with nice components too, and a game with a very good replay value thanks to the variety of the scenarios included. So, Bellum Gallicum Episode 2. A good game, a game that I would recommend. What are these doing here?